Hey, it's Tom here and welcome back to the channel. Now in this video I just want to give an update on a couple of bits of news that have come out this week in relation to Seritage growth properties. One is an article that came out of Bloomberg basically speculating that Seritage could potentially be thinking about selling to a private equity buyer or maybe someone that already has a large shareholding in the company, and what that kind of might look like for current shareholders. And the second bit of news was actually a press release from Seritage Growth Properties themselves, essentially on that same topic. So I want to read through some of the key points from the article, and mainly really the press release, because that's kind of the official info out of Seritage, and give you some of my thoughts on what they had to say, some of the changes happening on the board of directors, and what a potential sale or some of their plans could look like for minority shareholders like myself. So if you enjoy this video, be sure to hit like and also subscribe to the channel if you are new here. If you've got any thoughts on what is going on with Seritage from these recent articles and press releases and so on, definitely let me know down in the comments below. The market clearly thought it was quite a positive development. I think Seritage is up probably 35 to 40% just this week off kind of the back of this news, admittedly off some very low prices and 52-week lows, but it has definitely moved kind of aggressively upwards in a positive direction. So let's get into it, and I will give you some of my thoughts on this recent news out of SRG. Okay, so firstly let's have a look at this article out of Bloomberg, and I will leave this link down in the description if you're keen to check it out as well. So the article basically says Seritage Growth Properties, a real estate investment trust that emerged from the Sears bankruptcy, is exploring strategic alternatives, including a sale of the company, according to people familiar with the matter. It says New York-based Seritage, which owns property from Alaska to Florida, is working with the investment bank Barclays PLC on the plans. Seritage is open to a full sale of the company or a piecemeal disposal of the assets, the people said, asking not to be identified because the matter is private. The plans aren't final and the company could still decide to change course. A representative from Seritage declined to comment, while a representative for Barclays couldn't be reached for comment. Prospective buyers could include private equity firms, real estate companies, and former Sears Chief Executive Officer Eddie Lampert, who currently serves as chairman of Seritage, the people added. Lampert owns a 22.1% interest in the company and owns about 9.3% of the Class A shares, according to a filing last November. A representative for Lampert didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. Okay, so before I give you too many of my thoughts on that particular article out of Bloomberg, I want to jump to the Seritage website to a recent press release. So that article from Bloomberg came out on the 28th of February. The very next day, on the 1st of March, Seritage actually put out a press release confirming a lot of what was said in the article from Bloomberg, but it also had kind of one or two important additions. So again, link down in the description if you want to read the full press release, but here are some of my highlights. Seritage Growth Properties, a national owner and developer of 170 residential, retail and mixed-use properties, today announced that its board of trustees has commenced a process to review a broad range of strategic alternatives to enhance shareholder value. The company will continue to evaluate its balance sheet strategy and corporate structure to optimize the outcome of such a review. Andrea Olshan, the company's president and CEO, noted the board and management believe that there is an ongoing disconnect between the company's stock price and net asset value. The portfolio, which consists of 170 properties with distinct and diverse business plans and significant value creation opportunities, generally falls into the categories of cash-flowing, multi-tenant retail and triple net pad sites, residential development land, and large mixed-use master-planned developments. The opportunities for these underlying assets are extremely strong, and we believe that embarking on this process represents the most efficient way to unlock the full potential of this portfolio. We're committed to exploring a variety of opportunities to pull forward this value and deliver it to Seritage shareholders in the near term. Ms. Olshan continued, in the last year we've been laser focused on executing our strategy to further enhance the value of Seritage's assets. This includes diversifying our tenant base with high quality tech office, life sciences and medical tenants while improving rents and credit quality, pursuing densification opportunities and entitling properties for their highest and best use. Our successful implementation of this strategy at UTC and Aventura demonstrates the strength and diversity of the portfolio and exemplifies the type of development, execution and value creation currently underway at Seritage. As the board conducts its review, we remain open-minded to pursuing the right value maximizing alternative while delivering on our business plans to drive shareholder value. Now, the second bit of news from this press release was actually an update on Eddie Lampert, who is a major shareholder in Seritage and, at least previous to this press release, was the chairman of the board. So it said the company also today provided an update with respect to its board of trustees. Edward Lampert, chair of the Seritage board, is retiring from the board effective immediately. It's been a privilege to serve as chair of the Seritage board since 2015, said Mr. Lampert. I've always believed in the potential of Seritage and agree that its stock price is currently significantly undervalued. Mr. Lampert said, I encourage and support the board's efforts to explore and pursue strategic alternatives to enhance shareholder value. I've decided to retire to allow additional time to focus on my other investments and to provide me with greater flexibility to explore alternatives for my investment in Seritage, which could include participating with parties that may be interested in acquiring certain of the company's assets and trading shares in open market transactions. Okay, so quite a bit to digest out of the article and then the press release from Seritage. I want to maybe start with the strategic review and looking at potentially selling the company or taking Seritage private, which it sounds like might be one of the options that's on the table for Seritage. It really feels to me like there are probably about three likely outcomes. There could be others that I haven't considered, but to me there are three kind of obvious paths that Seritage could go down here. The first one, which was kind of mentioned in the Bloomberg article, was something to the effect of a piecemeal disposal of assets. And that really is Seritage largely continuing on its current path. So if you're not familiar already, Seritage kind of are already liquidating some of their assets to a certain extent. They've got a mix of properties, some of which they view as really attractive to redevelop and put capital into these properties to densify them and kind of enhance the property, to rent it out at really high rates to new tenants. And they've got other properties that they view as kind of less attractive for redevelopment and densification, and they're basically selling those properties to fund the ones that look more interesting and should generate higher returns on capital. So to an extent they already are selling some assets in order to kind of fund that process. So I think that is really the first thing that could happen, is that they go through this review process and kind of just decide that they're on the right path already and kind of continue with their redevelopment plans. Now, the second thing that I think could be possible is that Seritage just goes private, and this was really the biggest risk actually that Guy Spear mentioned in a talk that he did about a year ago on Seritage. He said, they've got a lot of debt, but they can make liquidity kind of available from selling properties. They do have some development risk and so on, but there's sufficient kind of margin of safety to hopefully keep shareholders protected from any issues that might come up with development and so on. And, the number one risk that Guy Spear kind of mentioned at that time is that Eddie Lampert or someone else could kind of take Seritage private and, public shareholders wouldn't be able to realize the full value of the Seritage assets kind of post all these big developments that they're doing. And I think that probably is, the second potential outcome, is that either Eddie Lampert or another buyer goes in and just purchases Seritage outright. And the interesting question here really is, how much is someone like Eddie Lampert or some buyer likely to pay for the Seritage assets? There's been plenty of videos done here on YouTube and presentations done here on YouTube, including by myself, that have broken down kind of the net asset value for Seritage. And in my view, at least, it's substantially higher than the current market price. And I think a lot of Seritage shareholders are pretty familiar with that and pretty confident in that. And, Jason on the After Dinner Investor channel has been doing some live streams these last couple of days, and I think he described it really well, that Seritage has quite a stubborn shareholder base. And just by the nature of how the stock has performed over the past few years, there are going to be a lot of investors that are currently in the red on their investment. And, they bought it thinking that maybe the net asset value was, just call it $30 per share for argument's sake. They're able to buy it at 15. I think it's currently 11 as I'm filming this video. And, they would not want to see, I think, Seritage bought out at still huge discounts to that net asset value. So what's actually a reasonable price to pay, we will kind of have to see how that all plays out. But I think that's kind of the second big option, is that there's some sort of offer made to Seritage shareholders that they, I'm assuming, will have to vote on around whether they want to accept that offer or not. And people like Eddie Lampert already have a big shareholding in the company and will have a lot of the votes towards that decision. But there's also a lot of minority shareholders that will know the net asset value of Seritage in their heads pretty clearly. And if there was some sort of buyout offer that came through, I think it would be kind of bittersweet in many ways for Seritage shareholders. There would be some price at which I would vote to, accept and just kind of sell my shares today. I had hoped to hold Seritage for quite a long period of time, really. They've got a reasonable runway in terms of new developments coming online and refinancing debt and paying down debt and, increasing rents over time. And I think they had a reasonable runway to continue to firstly get to a cash flow positive point and then grow those cash flows over time. And I think that could have produced, really attractive stock returns. And a buyout in that way is very bittersweet. So, maybe you pull forward a bit of return and you get some cash, fairly quickly, and you also eliminate the downside because, you're getting paid to give your shares away, but you also potentially give away a lot of the future upside as well. So that's kind of my view on that potential option. And I think the third option is potentially some sort of combination of 1 and 2. So some kind of combination of certain assets being bought possibly, and Seritage also continuing on their current path of redevelopment as a public company. And to me, that is kind of the option that is both most interesting but also potentially most concerning. Now, if you look through the Seritage Growth Properties portfolio, there's about 170 properties, and there are some exceptionally valuable properties, and there are also some properties that are really not very valuable. And there are other properties that are likely to be very valuable in future once they're fully redeveloped, and there's others that there's just really not a lot of scope for improvement, and those are the ones that SRG are kind of selling off. Now, in terms of the maximum amount of value creation at these properties, that's really going to come down to maybe a handful of what Seritage calls their premier mixed-use developments. So these are the properties in Dallas, for example, which has plans out there to be about 2 million square feet in leasable area and could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars once kind of fully developed and leased up. Now, if there was some sort of deal where some of the properties were sold to, give Seritage extra cash to continue down their development projects, we clearly wouldn't want to see those types of properties be the ones that get sold off in order to generate cash to do developments on, less attractive properties and that sort of thing. So that's probably the one that I'm potentially most concerned about and want to keep an eye on. I really wouldn't want to see those premier properties be swept up at cents on the dollar by some buyer, because that could really change the equation for SRG shareholders moving forward. And I really don't know that that's the most likely outcome of these three options, but it is something that's kind of in the back of my mind. And I don't think that it's completely outside of the realm of possibility. Now, very quickly on Eddie Lampert stepping down from the board, it really looks like he is interested in potentially doing something here. We saw a filing late last year where he basically converted all of his operating partnership units into Class A shares of Seritage, which was certainly an interesting move. We haven't seen any filings come through since then to suggest that he might have sold some shares or even that he might have bought some shares as well. But he did say specifically in this press release that open market transactions are a possibility. And to me, I kind of wonder whether Eddie Lampert might even be starting to get interested in buying up Seritage at current market prices to maybe build up his shareholding, build up his voting power on a potential upcoming transaction with Seritage, and that is potentially a cheaper way for him to acquire the Seritage assets. Just hypothetically, let's say that an offer came in for Seritage at $20 per share, and he currently owns a little north of 20% of Seritage. If he were to start acquiring shares at current market prices just in the open market and get himself up to 40% ownership in the company, then a couple of things would happen. He would be able to still put in an offer and buy out the balance of the shares at some sort of premium, although he wouldn't have to pay the same kind of total amount of dollars because he's acquired shares at much lower prices just in the open market. And it also gives him a whole lot more voting power for a potential deal that might kind of come across the table. Now, that again all is just pure speculation, and I'm just kind of putting ideas out there of what I think could potentially happen. And one of the other final things that I will just mention is that I've seen some commentary on Twitter that potentially any deal that might come up as it relates to Seritage most likely have to be signed off by Berkshire Hathaway. So Berkshire Hathaway provides basically all the debt to Seritage at the moment, and I would probably need to do some digging into exactly what the terms are on that debt to understand whether that's true or not, but I wouldn't be particularly surprised if any deal that does come across the table would have to be approved by Berkshire kind of lending all this money out to Seritage. So that's something I'll have to do more work on, but it's something to note certainly around this situation as well. So there you have it. That is a quick update on Seritage Growth Properties and some of my thoughts on what's happening with that particular company right now. Definitely let me know your thoughts on the situation down in the comment section below. Always keen to hear from you there. But that's it from me for this one, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.